Our guest today fell into distilling after years of being a self-proclaimed Pinot chaser. What is it exactly that drew her over to the spirit world? I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week we are inspired to live life one cocktail at a time. Sarah Elsom, master distiller of the Cardrona Distillery on the South Island of New Zealand, knew she wanted to work in wine from the age of 16. That passion took her all over the world and back again. When she returned home, she was lucky enough to walk into the fledgling Cardrona Distillery, and she has never left. Cardrona has grown over the years to produce not only award-winning whiskey, but also vodka, gin, and liqueurs. Thanks to the miracle of modern science, I was able to chat with Sarah, who guides us through Cardrona's approach to spirit making while she was in New Zealand and I was home in London. I'm really excited to have you here and to talk about all your brands, because you don't do only whiskey, but you do a lot of other things. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, how you got into distilling, how you found yourself at Cardrona?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sarah Elsom. I work for Cardrona Distillery, and I have been there since the place was a building site. So it is well and truly a part of my everyday, of my past and my future. I love that place. It's home. And I landed there. I was home in between harvests. So my direction or my vocation was actually winemaking. I chose winemaking at a really young age. I was, I think, 16 and at high school. And around that age where sort of teachers start putting that kind of idea in front of you of you need to start thinking about what you want to do for the rest of your life. And I, at that time, was very engrossed in sport, still am. So had the privilege of playing with older high school students that were making those decisions, even though I wasn't quite there yet. And one of them was looking at viticulture and oenology at a university that was about 6 hours away from home. And I wasn't drinking wine at the age of 16, but I think I just loved this idea of studying something that would take me to all these beautiful places around the world. So it was really motivated by travel, and then complemented by the fact that it was a science degree, but it wasn't medicine, or it was something that still allowed room for creativity. It wasn't really a linear direction. It could go in any way. And nothing else really captivated me more. So at the age of 16, I think that kind of came into my peripheral, and it never left. So I chose what university I was going to go to and what course I wanted to study quite early. And I think I was just lucky that when I got there, I really loved it. It wasn't just this idea. It was something that came to fruition. And I met some incredible people. And I was at a university that was quite practical. So you dive in quite quickly. And I loved it. And I did kind of think that maybe I'd get more into selling wine as opposed to making it. So it took my first job after university for me to realize that I'd much rather get my hands dirty and do the practical work and then let those products speak for themselves.
Do you remember the first time you had wine?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I'm a Kiwi girl through and through. So we basically cut our teeth on Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. So it probably explains why I love acidity and freshness and brightness in anything that I drink. And that my first harvest experience was the polar opposite of that. I went and worked in the Barossa Valley and made kind of the inkiest, deepest, darkest reds that you can imagine. So I've experienced it all. I've tended to gravitate towards Pinot Noir, and I love that it's on sort of the cusp of a climate that can even grow grapes. I love that it is grown in the vineyard, and if it's not grown well, it doesn't eventuate into a beautiful wine. And, it's tricky, it's challenging, it can go in so many directions. So I've definitely been a bit of a Pinot chaser, and that's taken me to California and to Canada and to Burgundy in France and then back to Central Otago, which is now home.
Well, thank goodness that when you made this decision, you did like wine, and that you didn't think, we made the wrong choice.
Yeah, I made it young enough that I could have been completely off the track. But, no, I've loved it. And it did exactly what I wanted to do. It's taken me all over the world. I'm very grateful for.
And so winemaking and distilling, were they similar, and how were you drawn into then distilling?
I think the lifestyle of winemaking created the opportunity to fall into distilling. And at that point in my career, it was very seasonal. I was sort of chasing that kind of harvest rush between southern and northern hemispheres. And it was in coming home that I was in between jobs. So you slow down and you look around, and you fill those gaps. And those gaps to me were always filled with roles in hospitality and talking about wine and serving wine. And of course, when you do that, you need to know a little bit about spirits. So I looked to the Wine and Spirits Education Trust and started doing a couple of papers. And there was a distillery that was being built down the road. And I had never even been to a distillery at this point because it had never really appealed. I was always chasing wine experiences.
Right.
And that slowing down in between harvests and taking that time to look around and kind of broaden my horizons, I was able to go and visit a distillery that was in construction phase and yet to open to the public. Had a conversation with the right people. I met with the manager. And I was sort of looking for maybe a part-time job just to sort of fill more gaps. And I walked away from that conversation with the job. And that was in 2015.
And had you been a drinker of any spirits? Like, did you like a G&T, or were you always, any time you could drink, it was wine?
I definitely loved a G&T. I loved the idea of a cocktail, but I never really gave spirits the same time that I gave wine. I didn't sort of sit and sip them neat and consider how they were made. It was more that they were always with something else, be it a cocktail or, with tonic or soda. So I think it took learning how to make spirits for me to appreciate the work that goes into how spirits are made.
And so when you started that first job, about how long did that take you? Was it immediate when you were like, oh my God, I never knew? That kind of thing? Was it like a eureka moment?
Yeah. I mean, I think because it was a brand new build, every day was exciting because we were unwrapping furniture and we were turning on, stills that were just being commissioned, and we were learning how to do it together every step of the way. So every day was absolutely a school day, and we were playing in this shiny equipment in this brand new plant, and we were discovering what things could taste and smell like that had never been made before. So it was it was exciting from day dot, and that hasn't changed. So that kind of eureka moment, and I don't know if there was just one. I think it was just really fun from day dot, and yeah, that hasn't changed.
A series of eureka moments, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think I remember my eureka moment with whiskey, and that was, I think with whiskey, and I hear this all the time, people, they believe that it's not the spirit for them, that they've maybe been introduced to one that is really strong, be it in flavor, be it in alcohol. Maybe it's like heavily peated,
right.
And it's regressive for their first taste. But I think when you find that one that is just delicious and goes on forever for you, that's when you can really start to get into whiskey and appreciate how it's made and where it comes from and the people that made it. And for me, that was at the top of a ski field. We hiked to the summit and someone got out a hip flask, and it was just like, I think the best thing I've ever brought to my lips.
It's funny. I was just at a lunch yesterday, and one of the girls at lunch was saying, oh, no, I don't drink whiskey. I hate it. And I was like, have you ever had bourbon? And she said, no. I said, okay, come back to me when you've tried that and then tell me. Because again, I also read a book on whiskey, and they said there's always one for you. So I'm totally with you there. There is that one whiskey moment. Now, the distillery that you started in, what were they planning, or what did they make? Was it starting with gin and then going on to whiskey?
So that was Cardrona. Cardrona's been the sole title of my career in distillation. And for Desiree, her vision was to celebrate malted barley. So make spirits all from the same base alcohol. She was always going to make a vodka and whiskey, absolutely. The liqueur kind of came as she was researching and traveling the world, and that was going to be an orange liqueur, which is our signature. It was gin that came a little later, that came a year into us being sort of in full production mode. So that was the last of the table, but has very much cemented itself as part of our portfolio as what we do. So Cardrona is really as all I know, and I think it's great that we make a range of spirits. I think the fact that it's all from the same base spirit is not a limiting factor. If anything, it's more exciting.
All right. Okay. We have to unpack that a lot. So I didn't realize that was your first foray into distilling is where you are now. How exciting. So then go back to maybe a little history, maybe kind of like when you went for the job interview, what were they telling you? What was the thinking before they even had a distillery? What was their mindset? What was Desiree's mindset and the other folks who created it?
So the conversation for me personally was I was going to go in and be like a guide. So the fact that I had experience as a winemaker meant that I'd be able to pick up the content quickly and sort of adopt those principles and be able to sort of communicate them clearly to our visitors. I just found myself drawn to production as I do, and happened to fall more into a production role within the first month or two. But the initial conversations were that I would be more of a communicator and a guide. Thinking back, there was only 12 of us when we started, so everyone actually did everything. There was no, you're a guide and you're a distiller and you know, you're making coffee and you're whipping up food for visitors. It was drop tools and go and make sure everyone that walks through the door has just the best time.
So how long was it from unwrapping all the furniture to actually taking guided tours around?
I mean, that sort of team came on in the last couple of sort of months of the construction period. It was a full year's work. I mean, a lot of work goes into the planning, the resource consent, the breaking ground, and Desiree can take full credit for so much of that. But the actual construction of the distillery took a full year, largely led by her father and her then husband, Ash Whitaker. And we came on around September, October, and we opened the doors to the public early December.
All right. Well, tell us the thinking behind even starting the distillery. You know, why did it even come about?
And that's Desiree's story, and it's one that we tell every day because it is a remarkable one. Des, she left university. She went off to be a lawyer, and it was not for her. She sort of made quite a brave decision to walk away from something that she was very good at. She's an incredible student. She's an academic to the core, and she dropped out of uni and she went over to the UK and started pouring pints. It seems to be a rite of passage for a lot of Kiwis. We like to get on planes that go and find ourselves. And she fell in love with spirits over there. You know, she was pouring these beautiful single malt whiskies for her patrons in a cool little bar in London. And I think that was possibly where a seed was planted. It definitely was for her love of spirits. But it was many years later, before the distillery was born, she came back to New Zealand, followed her father into dairy. So she has a strong background in running a dairy farm and taking something small and making it big and successful. But again, it was not for her. So she sold that farm, and it was the capital from that sale that allowed her to sort of sit down and do some soul searching and think about what she wanted to do for the rest of her life. And so she started writing lists about things that really excited her, scrapping them, starting again, researching them, thinking about how she could create an artisan type product in New Zealand and put her own sort of spin on it. And things like, you know, New Zealand's version of buffalo mozzarella or salmon farming. And she looked very closely at perfume. And we actually are, Cardrona Distillery is surrounded by over 2,500 perfumery roses. We are growing them with the thought that perhaps one day we will make a perfume. So that dream is definitely not forgotten, but it was in researching alcohol for perfume, so neutral alcohol, that sort of dream evolved and became spirit alcohol for consumption. So from perfume went whiskey, and from whiskey went let's just celebrate our raw ingredients and make more than whiskey. And so vodka made from malted barley, not trying to strip away flavor and really celebrate the byproducts of fermentation beyond ethanol and celebrate all those great esters and capture them in the glass and have a vodka that has weight, that has aroma, and then use that as this incredible base for a gin that celebrates local botanicals, for liqueurs that just go on forever. And she has done something pretty cool.
No, was it always going to be malted barley in her head?
Yes.
That she was going to make the spirit out of?
Mm-hmm.
Why was that?
I think the idea of creating a premium New Zealand single malt whiskey was the driving force, and the sort of diversion of other spirits happened naturally. That being making a single malt whiskey, our country is small but very proud, and I think when we go for something, we want to compete on the world stage. And so she went for the King of Grants. And
the vodka, how long did it take before she had a vodka that she thought, okay, I'm going to bottle this?
Yeah, I mean, well, the vodka and the whiskey become two very different things depending on the still we use to distill them. So they're the same in the tin room and creating the base alcohol, and then the vodka is captured with column stills versus copper pot stills for the whiskey. And I mean, we can make vodka in 8 days, you know, from milling to getting in a bottle. I think it definitely took time to commission those stills and to discover sort of what that sort of ester profile needed to look like. Because it is, if you're a vodka drinker and you're searching for neutrality or that purity in the form of it tasting like absolutely nothing, then the Reed is not for you. The Reed is almost the gateway to whiskey because it has weight in it, and there's so much going on in the glass. But yeah, and I mean, we can't underestimate the planning and the little choices that you make along the way in building a distillery that create your signature style. You can't undo the shape and size of your stills and their construction. And I would imagine that she spent a lot of time thinking about these details. Absolutely.
Yeah, it must have been so exciting to be there, the whole time. And when the first batch, right from the still and tasted it, it must have been really exciting.
And it still feels like that because the whiskey is aging. And, every time we taste an older spirit, it's the first time we've ever tried it at that age. So there's still definitely that excitement.
Absolutely. So you first had the vodka, the Reed.
Yes.
So tell me about the naming of it. Number one, the distillery is named after the place where you are, right?
Yes.
So how about the name of the vodka? How did that come about?
So Reed is Desiree's maiden name. The vodka was the very first thing that she made, and she wanted her family name on the bottle. The name is hugely, it's sentimental, it's important to her. It's also the name of her baby girl. So she named her daughter Reed as well.
Mm-hmm. And was she always going to call her whiskey the name of the place?
I'm not too sure, but I think it resonated. I mean, the place, I think, drew her quite early in the game. So the Cardrona Valley is very special to her. Mm-hmm. And the name of the valley itself is strong. And it's a place in Scotland, like so many places in New Zealand, that have a connection to Scotland. And I think that felt right, that she wanted to make a whiskey that would, stand shoulder to shoulder with the best that Scotland could make. So I think the name of the place and being Scottish was really fitting for her ambition.
So the whiskey itself, can you tell me a little bit about the process of the whiskey making?
Yeah, sure thing. So we receive the malted barley on site. We mill it to our specifications. We then mash in and create a base alcohol. We apply minimal raking in the mash tun. So it's really, it's more about just collecting the maximum amount of that kind of natural sugar source from a grain that is highly selected. So we work with varieties that are approved for distillation through Institute of Brewing and Distillation. And we don't want to extract too much of the husk and that grit tannin. We're looking for something that in the glass will be strong, but fruit forward and layered and not overly kind of woody or aggressive. So minimal raking in the mash tun. Our fermentation program is a minimum of 72 hours in tank. And now you need at least sort of 48, 50 to capture the ethanol potential, I guess, of a fermentation. And hours beyond that, you're really starting to make stylistic decisions. So the push to 72, that extra time in tank allows these quite interesting byproducts. So the yeast becomes stressed and they create aldehydes and acids that become esters. And a really predominant one is isoamyl acetate, which just smells like banana and pear. So the tun room itself just smells like banana bread on like day 2 of the fermentation. It's really delicious. And then beyond that, you get sort of secondary ferment characters. You get a bit of lactobacillic bacteria. And we're probably getting a bit more of that now than we will in the future. In the future, when we're producing more, we're sort of growing into ourselves right now. And we'll leave things in tank for 72 and then it'll be off to the still house. Whereas right now, at 72 hours, we take a little bit out of the tank and we distill it. And then the next day we're back again. So we actually end up with wash in the tank for up to sort of 105 hours. So lots of time to create a lot of character. And people don't often realize when they visit distilleries that the character of a whiskey or any spirit is really created in fermentation and what you create in your base alcohol. The stills are designed to sort of capture that. So we do place a lot of emphasis on our fermentations and our fermentation program and what we can achieve in that road. And from there on, they're off to the still house, and the still that they are sent to determines what they will end up being, be it whiskey, be it vodka, and beyond.
Now, the barrels that they go into.
Yes.
What have you decided to use?
We definitely sort of started off down the more traditional route of capitalizing on beautiful Kentucky ex-bourbon barrels. So they come over from America. Right. We've had one load from Breckenridge, Colorado as well, just to spice things up. And then we're very fortunate to get hold of a few ex-Oloroso Gonzalez Bias sherry butts, which are fantastic to work with. And we've continued to sort of hold on to that sherry element in our maturation portfolio because it does serve our new spirits so well. And then, of course, being in Central Otago, we had to sort of capitalize on this location. And we have a great relationship with an incredible Pinot Noir producer, Felton Rouge, over in Bannockburn. So 40 minutes over the hill, through the mountain pass, and at Cardrona, we grow about sort of 60 to 100 of those a year.
Now, of course, the American me wants to know, so the different ex-bourbon barrels from Kentucky and Colorado, are you finding that they produce much different flavor?
I think so, yes, absolutely. I think we did a single cask release at the Breckenridge, and I think it was probably our most sort of sweet and effervescent type. It was just a lot more alive in the glass. And I think we've got a large proportion of Heaven Hill. There's a little bit of Four Roses dotted in there, Woodford Reserve. I mean, when we launched the Solera, our sort of on-the-shelf whiskey all the time versus single cask, that is a marriage of both sherry and bourbon brought together. So we are kind of looking to sort of iron out those sort of differences. But I think in tasting individual casks, absolutely, it's its own little microclimate. So,
yeah, it must have been so interesting to have that because you think of a barrel that has that bourbon in it, at least for the layman, would pretty much give you the same taste. But one from Colorado, which has such a cold, weather, and one that has such hot weather in Kentucky, that they would, of course, give out a different flavor.
Yeah, sure. I think it's really also really important because we're not practicing sort of shaving and recharring and kind of recreating something on site just maybe down the road. But for right now, we're really just celebrating where we source the barrels from. So Desiree and Ash did a lot of work and, hard work traveling the world and finding bourbons that they loved and trying to grab those barrels because ultimately it is a huge part of the result.
I would love to have been on that trip.
Yeah, so did I. I think if she ever wants to sort of go back and revisit that, I'll put my head straight on.
No, but you're the master distiller. You can say, we need to go back and
possibly,
redo that.
See. Now that we can travel again, maybe I'll bring it up.
Right, exactly. Now, what is the youngest and the oldest whiskey that you have already bottled?
So we did launch a 3-year, and that was never really part of the game plan from the start. We thought we would. Desiree really wanted to wait until 2025 and launch a 10-year and not do anything earlier. Celebrate the white spirits, let them do the talking, and let them keep us afloat, and then release just phenomenal whiskey. But people were hungrier than that. They wanted to know what was going on in that barrel, and there was so much excitement about the potential of Cardrona. And I think just tasting through casks and getting the opinions of people that have tried a lot of young whiskies and seeing where they're at and where they can go and recognizing potential early. And we were very fortunate to be visited by the likes of Dave Broom and Charles McLean and some big names in whiskey, and they were like, "What are you doing? Get it out there!" And so arms were twisted, I guess. And it was really important to Des that whiskey was launched with that kind of very open and honest recognition that we know that it's young. So the 3-year was put on a shelf with a label under Cardrona that said just hatched. And then our 5-year, which we're now celebrating, is called Growing Wings. We have somewhat adopted the New Zealand falcon as a bit of our, I guess, mascot. It is a bird that visits us, that is special to this country and to our distillery. And it became our way of symbolizing the fact that this is this young whiskey that is really just a snapshot in time. And how exciting is it that it tastes like this now? Because just think of the adult whiskey to come.
Yes, of course. Do you know what it's going to be called, the 10-year? Are you allowed to tell us?
No, I know. So next year we'll be releasing a 7-year, and that will be called Full Flight. So I can definitely tell you that. I think when we get to 10 and beyond, we'll celebrate age statements for what they are.
Okay.
We might look at single casks, absolutely, but sort of fun expressions where we play with age statements. Time will tell, I guess. I think we're figuring this out as we go.
Now, while that's all in barrels waiting, you also have produced these wonderful liqueurs.
Yes.
Again, was that always part of the game plan to have them?
I think the orange came on very early. That was conversations at trade shows, bumping shoulders with teachers, and Zero sort of formulated that recipe really quite early for the orange liqueur. And then because the recipe they're simple. What we do is we infuse flavor with that single malt spirit. So celebrate everything that effectively the reed and prior to dilution offers, all of those beautiful esters, that weight, and then complement that with an infusion of fruit or flower or flavor, and never anything artificial. And then use sugar and water to balance the elements, to create mouthfeel, to soften and lengthen and keep the alcohol high. Now, all of our liqueurs are over 40% ABV, and they are designed to be sipped neat or crafted into a beautiful cocktail, but one where they're the hero. You know they're in there, and they're not just that sort of 5 ml splash on for colour or to balance things out. They're the standout players. So orange, yes, but the other ones that have followed, no. I guess we've got 3 this year that we've never done before, which is quite exciting. So there's room to play with the liqueurs, absolutely.
Now, why was orange the first choice out of everything?
I think it's definitely a flavour that marries well with whiskey, perhaps. I think, you think of it old-fashioned, or you think of, cocktails come to mind, where orange is definitely something that is worked in. I think for Des, it was really just her love of cosmopolitans.
I love it. And I was going to say, margarita.
Makes a delicious margarita, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. And so what were the others, the other flavors that followed?
The ones that followed were an elderflower, so there's a bit of lemon in that as well. That's really very a beautiful, bright, and suited to effervescence, sort of like put a little bit of soda water or with a little bit of champagne and you're off. And then one that Zero sort of sat on and kind of came up with at home and sort of detached from anything else was our butterscotch liqueur. And that's something that she's chosen to not sort of communicate in the tour with the process. She wants to sort of keep that as a family recipe that she passes down to her daughter, so her daughter can pass that down to her daughter.
Now, butterscotch, it doesn't surprise me because as a lover of whiskey, obviously butterscotch is always one of those flavors that I find in whiskey, at least in bourbon, caramel, that always comes to mind. Have you played with it with your whiskey?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we always do. I mean, we've got an incredible little cocktail bar on site. I say little because it wasn't part of the plan A. It's a bit somewhat of a pop-up bar. But the team are so creative, and making cocktails is an incredible way for us to engage with our customers, with local bartenders. And we currently have an international competition on the go where the best bartenders of the United Kingdom and New Zealand are going to come together in a grand final here in New Zealand in September of this year. So regional finals are happening right now. And this is like really exciting way for us to see how our spirits could be played with above and beyond what we would ever imagine they could be. So yeah, definitely we're going to play.
Well, I've jumped the gun with the cocktails. Back to your last but not least, the source, your gin.
Yes, yeah, the source.
You said that was the last thing that you created. It's funny, when people have a distillery, they always think, okay, vodka, gin, then the whiskey. But you said it was the reverse.
Yes, so that came on the insistence of Desiree's husband, Ash. He was a huge part of the build. He was basically the sales force at the start and really drove the product. He sold his business and invested in the distillery and basically just threw himself at it for the first couple of years. And it was on his insistence that there be a gin. And so the gin came into the fold that little bit later. And I think it was an incredible foresight on his behalf, because that gin wave that has sort of taken over the United Kingdom has very much found its way to New Zealand. And the gin in the first couple of years especially was a huge part of what we did.
And apart from obviously the juniper, how did you choose which botanicals you wanted to add to it?
It was a real team effort, led by one particular team member. Her name is Linda Jones. She, prior to coming to Cardrona and in sort of a previous life, and still really stay as a herbalist. So she had this really cool 10-litre copper still at home, and we just sort of played with these little micro trials of things that would complement our base spirit, but not overpower. The idea with the sauce was to create something and celebrated the kind of esters that are in the reed and the leaf that is in the reed, and absolutely be a gin, but not one where the botanicals sort of were the king. And I think we've done that with the sauce. We have just 6 botanicals. juniper, absolutely, coriander seed, angelica root. We peel the lemons fresh on the day, so fresh cinnamon peel, fresh orange peel, and then local rosehip we go out and pick everywhere it grows wild in the valley, and then we dry out so that we have it on hand throughout all of winter and spring, which is when we like to make the bulk of our white spirits.
Now, I know that you have, as you said, roses for perfume. Have you ever thought to use any edible roses in any of your products?
I mean, we definitely, I mean, the rosehip is something we do celebrate a lot with the gin. We've played with putting the rose petals in the gin still with just water to create rose water for perhaps cocktails. And it's incredibly potent, really, really beautiful. But I wouldn't want it to touch the gin. It's too strong a smell on the still. So haven't gone back there. Would need a lot more equipment to do that down the road. But no, we've played with edible roses. We do have a edible rose type garden that services the kitchen, and we have a beautiful restaurant on site. And so the food is regularly decorated with beautiful edible flowers, but the spirits do not.
No, not yet. At least you never know. There could be a liqueur on the horizon, right? Now, we were talking about cocktails.
Yes.
When you were creating these spirits, and this is probably a silly question, but did you have in mind how you wanted people to enjoy them, first, or be introduced to them first? Or were you like, okay, it doesn't matter, however they want to drink them, that's it?
The answer might be different depending on which distiller you speak to, and absolutely if you had a conversation with this. But for me personally, I think no. I think you should always aim to create something that is delicious, neat, and then you create after that. If you go at something, if you try and create something that needs something else to lift it or to marry with or to balance it, then you haven't made a complete product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So how does it feel to have this competition? That they're taking this wonderful, neat spirit and playing with it.
I love it because it just, they do so much more than I had ever imagined possible. I mean, there's one contestant that took the food waste from the creation of his cocktail and made a coaster out of it. And that's what his cocktail sat on.
Oh, no way.
And I was just like, that's so great. Just little things like that. I just thought that was fantastic. And they all have a story to tell them, and they're competing and they're so passionate, and, they're bursting out of lockdown. So their creativity is just like, and I really love it. I'm really looking forward to, the regional finals are happening right now. So we're getting all the imagery and the footage, but the local one for this area hasn't happened yet. So I'm really, really excited to just even attend one, and then can't wait for the final and hear it in Wanaka. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Now, you probably can't reveal too much about it, but were there any other surprises of combinations that you were like, oh my God, I can't even believe that someone thought of that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to just sort of remember just one, because the recipes that are coming through and the care that goes into individual elements, and things are prepared over days, or this is sous vide and this is a foam that they've created, and it's so far beyond simply I've got my shaker at home and bits and pieces, but this is artistry, and this is science. This is something that is really cool. So we've made sure that we're not missing a thing, and we've created our own Instagram tag, our hashtag. Everything's sort of being captured in social media, and it's just been a real ride watching the footage come in.
And are they using all of the different spirits?
They just need to use one.
Okay.
So that's up to them.
And when is the final?
The final is this September, and it is September the 19th. And we've kept it quite open, just hoping that everyone will be able to travel. And it's looking like it's going to happen. We're not going to have to cancel, which is awesome. And the regional finals are just happening right now. So it's coming together.
Oh, it's going to be so exciting. I can't wait to see what they create. And yes, so speaking of that, I always ask, now I know you're a distiller, not a bartender, but I'm sure you have an opinion on this. Your top tips for the home bartender, if you have any, using your spirits, not using your spirits, whatever you think.
Yeah, I definitely would never claim to be a skilled bartender. There are people that do that much better than me. I think it's just really important to sort of remove that sort of overwhelming fear that cocktails need to be really tricky. I think a great cocktail and is a simple one. It's just executed well. And I think the best thing to do is just to start having a play, and you'll be surprised at what you can learn really quickly. And some of them, my favorites, just take next to no effort. Yeah, I'm not too sure if I have any real tips. I think, just break down that barrier of thinking that you can't do it, because it's definitely something that everyone can have a crack at. And I think you'd be surprised at how easily your friends will be impressed.
Exactly. Just whip out the bottle and then they're like, ooh, that's great. You know that.
Yeah.
And also, last but not least, if you could be anywhere drinking anything in the world, where would that be and what would you drink?
Oh my goodness. It's quite easy. So my partner and I are actually flying to Scotland tomorrow, and we haven't seen his family in about 3 years. So we are very much looking forward to being over there. And I think right now I just want to be on the other side of the plane on this big journey ahead of us and be having a whiskey with his family. I think that'd be pretty special. We're going to have a night in Edinburgh, and I love that city. So sitting in a wee bar with his family in Edinburgh sounds pretty great right now. What we would be drinking, most likely a whiskey. And for the cocktail fans, I love a whiskey sour as well. As simple as they are, I think that love of whiskey and that love of acidity, what would the whiskey be? If I wanted a little bit of peat, maybe a Bonewall 15. That's something that I loved when I visited Islay. That really spoke to me. And otherwise, what would it be? Maybe just an Ardmore, an Abunda, just a delicious sort of sherry dram. I think that'd be my pick.
Oh, well, sounds great. Gosh, Scotland. It's amazing that you could even pick two. Listen.
Right. And every time you go, you find new ones. So I think that's the joy of whiskey, is like there's so much to discover.
I know, it's all a story. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was really, really exciting to learn about everything that you're doing all the way over there. And safe travels. And we'll see you on this side very soon.
Thank you. Yeah, just to be able to do it again. I'm so excited.
I know. Traveling. Yay. Thanks. Thanks so much to Sarah for not only being on the program and introducing us to all the Cardrona spirits, but also sponsoring the transcription for the hearing impaired. I know you're asking, which spirit will we use for our cocktail of the week? Well, here it comes. Our cocktail of the week is the Cardrona Raspberry Cooler. It's the perfect time to make it, as raspberries are in season. Grab your highball glass and drop 4 raspberries and 10 ml of sugar into the glass and muddle them together until crushed. Then add 40 ml of the Source gin and 20 ml of fresh lemon juice. Stir well, add more crushed ice, and then garnish with raspberries and a mint sprig. I'm literally about to make one right now. You'll find this recipe, more summery cocktail recipes, and all the cocktails of the week at alushlifemanual.com, where you'll find most of the ingredients in our shop. Acid reflux is getting better, and thank goodness, as this is the weekend that we celebrate Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee. 70 years doing her thing. Amazing. So if you live for Lush Life, make sure you head out to the bars and restaurants you love and tell them how much you love them. Theme music for Lush Life is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. And Lush Life is always and will be forever produced by Evo Terra and Simpler Media Productions. Which leads me to say the wise words of Oscar Wilde: all things in moderation, including moderation, and always drink responsibly. Next week, we're in Paris to drink at one of the best bars in the world. Until that time, bottoms up.